Why did no one notice her hands shaking as she lowered the rifle? Not from fear, from memory. The shot never came, not yet. Time stretched, elastic and cruel, holding her between then and now, between the rooftop and the wadi, between the woman she had become and the medic she once was, kneeling in dust that refused to let go of blood. She forced the memory down, not burying it, just setting it aside, like a loaded round waiting in the chamber. Ghost 1, Miller whispered. Wind shifting, slight tail from 9 o'clock, you feel that? I do, Elena replied softly. Her voice never betrayed what her chest carried. Below, the firefight surged again, a flash of movement, a scream cut short. Maddox barked orders, trying to hold a perimeter that was bleeding men in seconds. She adjusted the turret by muscle memory alone. Click, click. The rifle answered with mechanical honesty. She had learned long ago that machines didn't care who you were. They only cared if you understood them. That lesson came after Marcus, after the rejection letters, after being told politely at first, then bluntly, that she didn't belong where she knew she needed to be. Combat medic, they'd said, essential, valuable. But not a sniper. Not you. She remembered standing outside the range fence late at night, watching trainees she outscored on every metric walk past her without a glance. Remembered the way instructors talked over her, around her, never to her. She never argued. She trained. She studied until equations replaced dreams. She learned wind the way others learned language, not by sound but by feel, on skin, in bone, in instinct sharpened by math. That was the secret no one wanted to hear. This wasn't talent. It was obsession. Ghost 1, Maddox snapped again. I need a status now. She exhaled slowly. Target acquired. A pause. Then disbelief, barely hidden. That's a negative, Petrova. That range is. I know the range. The words were calm, respectful, final. She didn't need permission. She needed silence. Miller stopped firing, he knew. When Alina's voice went that flat, the decision was already made. 30 seconds, he said quietly. They're setting the tube. She leaned into the rifle. The warhead shimmered through the optic, distorted by heat and fog. A tiny, merciless circle. Her breathing slowed into the space between heartbeats. She remembered the first time she'd hit 1,000 meters in training. Not the cheers, there were none. Just an instructor lowering the spotting scope and staring at her like she'd broken something sacred. Do it again, he'd said. She did. And again. Until disbelief turned into silence. Silence was always her victory. The wind gusted harder. She adjusted. The numbers aligned. The doubt did not matter. This was never about proving anything. This was about stopping a rocket from erasing people who trusted her without knowing her name. Her finger tightened. Not squeezed. Tightened. The rifle thundered. Recoil slammed into her shoulder, sharp and absolute. The round vanished into night. 2 seconds. 2.5. Time stretched until it almost hurt. Then, the ridge bloomed with fire. Not a clean flash. A violent, roaring explosion that swallowed the figures whole and sent debris tumbling into darkness. For half a breath the valley froze. Then shouting, confusion, retreat. Holy, someone whispered on comms. Maddox didn't speak at first. Alina was already scanning for secondary threats. RPG team neutralized, she said evenly. Hostage building clear, no collateral. Silence again. But this time it felt different. He finally exhaled. Say again. You heard me, sir. Another pause. Then quieter, changed. Copy, Ghost 1. She lowered the rifle slowly. Her hands still trembled, but now not from memory. From release. From knowing she had kept a promise made in blood years ago. She pressed her forehead briefly against the cool metal of the scope. Not in prayer. In acknowledgement. The bullet had spoken. And somewhere deep inside, a voice that had haunted her for years finally went quiet. But the night wasn't finished with her yet. Because this shot, this impossible, undeniable moment would change more than the battle below. It would force every man who doubted her to confront something far more uncomfortable than failure. Truth. And truth, once seen, could never be unseen. If you want, reply to, and I'll continue seamlessly into the next 1,000-word section, where trust begins to crack, and Alina is tested not just by distance, but by command. Why did the silence after the explosion feel heavier than the firefight itself? For a moment, no one spoke. Not Maddox, not Miller, not the men below who were still crouched behind broken walls, waiting for something else to go wrong, because in their world, something always did. Alina stayed prone, cheek pressed to the stock, eyes still behind the optic. She didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't even exhale fully. Experience had taught her that survival liked to pretend it was finished, right before it was. Smoke curled where the ridge had been alive seconds earlier. Shrapnel still clattered down stone. The fog drifted, indifferent to what physics had just been forced to do. "Assault push," Maddox finally ordered, his voice lower now, controlled but altered. "Move before they regroup." His tone carried something new, not awe, not praise. Reliance. The team moved, fast, clean, the way professionals do when they believe the ground above them is being watched by someone who will not blink. Alina tracked every alley, every rooftop, every heat signature blooming and fatting through her thermal. She fed calm, precise callouts, short sentences, no emotion. Inside, however, something churned. Not pride. Unease. Because she knew what came next. She had seen it before, not in combat, but in rooms with fluorescent lights and folded arms. The moment when success didn't erase doubt, it only sharpened it. Maddox hadn't believed she could make the shot. He had been right to doubt. It was impossible. And yet, "Ghost 1," Miller murmured beside her, not looking up from his scope. "Wind's calming, you good?" "I'm good." It was a lie, but a manageable one. Below, the hostage building was breached. Shapes flooded in. Then slowly, carefully, shapes came out, hands zip-tied, heads bowed, alive. Alive. Alina felt something loosen in her chest, a knot she hadn't realized she was still holding. Minutes passed, then more. The valley exhaled. "Objective secure," Maddox reported. "No KIA, minor wounded only." Only then did Alina finally pull back from the scope. Her face was numb from cold. Her muscles screamed as sensation returned. She rolled onto her side, flexed her fingers, forced circulation back into them. Miller glanced at her. "You just rewrote a chapter tonight," he said quietly. She shrugged. Physics didn't change. "No," he replied, "people did." That was what she feared. The return flight was silent. Not the comfortable kind. The kind where everyone is replaying the same moment in their head, trying to decide what it means. Alina sat strapped in, helmet resting against the bulkhead, eyes closed. The rhythmic thump of rotors vibrated through her bones. Usually that sound calmed her. Tonight it didn't. She could feel eyes on her. Not hostile. Not friendly. Curious. Measuring. At base, the debrief room filled slowly. Men took seats. Gear clinked. Water bottles hissed open. Someone laughed too loudly, then stopped. Maddox entered last. He didn't sit right away. He stood at the head of the table, hands braced against its edge, staring at the map projected on the wall. The red circle marking the ridge still glowed faintly. "That shot," he said at last without looking at her. "Who confirmed the range?" Miller answered, "I did." "And the wind solution?" "I fed data, she made the call." Maddox nodded slowly. "Doctrine says that rifle's effective range tops out far below that." "Yes, sir." "Doctrine says you don't engage small, volatile targets at that distance under variable wind." "Yes, sir." Maddox finally turned. His eyes found Alina. "Doctrine also says we're all alive tonight." The room stayed quiet. This was the moment. She felt it like pressure in her ears before a dive. "You disobeyed a direct order," he continued. "Yes, sir." No excuses, no justification. That was another lesson she'd learned early. Explanation sounded like fear. Maddox studied her for a long second, longer than necessary. "Why?" The question wasn't sharp, it wasn't angry. It was honest. Alina chose her words carefully. "Because if I didn't shoot, people died." "That's not an answer," someone muttered. She didn't look at them. "It's the only one that mattered," she replied. Maddox leaned back, crossing his arms. "You took a risk that could have compromised the entire assault." "Yes, sir." "And you were right." Silence shifted again. Not heavy now. Uncomfortable. Maddox exhaled through his nose. "I don't like miracles," he said. "They make commanders lazy." She met his gaze steady. This wasn't a miracle. That caught his attention. What was it then? "Preparation," she said simply, "and consequences." A few men exchanged looks. Maddox nodded once slowly. "Debrief complete," he said. "Get some rest." Chairs scraped. Conversations restarted, quieter now, less certain. As the room emptied, Maddox stopped her with a raised hand. "Petrova, stay." Miller hesitated, then left. The door closed. Maddox didn't sit. He didn't soften his voice. "You don't fit neatly," he said. "You know that." "Yes, sir." "You make people uncomfortable." She almost smiled. "That's not my intent." "I know," he paused, "but intent doesn't always matter." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Out there when I told you not to shoot, you ignored me." "Yes, sir." "You didn't hesitate." "No, sir." "That scares me." "It should have." She nodded. "It should." Maddox studied her again, not as a commander now, but as a man recalibrating his map of the world. "Why do you stay so quiet?" he asked suddenly. The question surprised her more than the reprimand would have. She thought of Marcus, of training alone, of being overlooked because silence was easier than fighting every assumption. "Because noise doesn't change math," she said. He let out a short, humorless breath. "You know they're going to test you harder now." "Yes, sir." "They'll wait for you to fail." "Yes, sir." "And if you do?" She met his eyes. "Then they'll be right." Maddox nodded once. "Get some rest, Ghost One." The call sign sounded different now. Not ironic. Not provisional. Earned but fragile. As she walked out into the cold night air, Alina felt both lighter and heavier. She had proven she could make the impossible shot. Now she had to survive what came after. Because the battlefield was honest. People weren't. And the next test wouldn't be about distance. It would be about trust. And trust, she knew, was harder to calculate than wind. Why did she feel more exposed in the daylight than she ever had under fire? Morning came without ceremony. No music, no triumph, just cold air and the low mechanical hum of a base waking up like nothing extraordinary had happened. Alina stood alone on the range before anyone else arrived. The targets were already set, steel silhouettes scattered across uneven terrain, distances marked in small, almost dismissive numbers, Easy shots, comfortable shots. She hated those. She lay prone anyway, letting the gravel bite into her elbows, feeling the rifle settle into her shoulder. The world narrowed not from danger this time, but from habit. She fired. The steel rang. Again. And again. Perfect groups, boring almost. Footsteps crunched behind her. She didn't turn. "You ever miss on purpose?" Rodriguez asked. "No." He crouched beside her, watching the target sway. Figures. There was an awkward pause, the kind that came from admiration mixed with uncertainty. He cleared his throat. "Last night," he said, "when that ridge blew, I thought we were dead. I was already planning how not to panic." She adjusted her sling. "You did fine." He laughed quietly. "You say that like it's math." She almost said it is, but stopped. Rodriguez hesitated, then added, "People are talking." "I know." "Good things," he clarified. "Mostly." Mostly was never reassuring. She finished the string and sat up, rolling her shoulders. The sun crested the mountains, casting long shadows that made even familiar ground look deceptive. That was when Maddox's voice cut across the range. "Petrova, briefing room, 5 minutes." No tone, no hint. Just an order. Inside, the room felt smaller than it had the night before. Maps were laid out, UAV stills pinned to boards, a new operation already breathing. Alina took her seat at the edge of the table, as she always did. Maddox stood at the front, hands clasped behind his back. "We've got intel on a weapons facilitator moving through a valley network," he began. "Not high value enough for fireworks. Clean capture preferred." He gestured to a ridgeline photo. "We need overwatch here." Silence followed. Then, almost casually, Maddox said, "Ghost One will take the shot if it goes loud." A few heads turned. Not hostile. Assessing. Alina felt it immediately, the weight of expectation replacing doubt, a different kind of pressure. She didn't react. "Chief Miller will spot," Maddox continued. "Secondary overwatch from Bravo element." He looked directly at her. "You comfortable with that terrain?" She studied the image. Wind channels, dead ground, false cover. "Yes, sir." He nodded once. "Good." After the briefing, she lingered, reviewing the imagery alone. The room emptied slowly until only Maddox remained. He watched her trace wind corridors with her finger. "You don't hesitate," he said. She didn't look up. Hesitation costs. Confidence can too. That made her pause. She met his gaze. "This isn't confidence." "What is it then?" "Acceptance." He frowned. "Of what?" "Of outcomes." That answer sat heavy between them. Maddox leaned against the table. "You don't talk about your past." She returned her focus to the map. "It doesn't help." "It helps people understand you." "That's not my job." His jaw tightened slightly, then relaxed. "You ever think about what happens when the math is wrong?" She did. "Every night." "Yes, sir." "And—" She finally looked up. "Then I live with it." The mission unfolded quietly. Too quietly. Alina lay hidden on the ridge hours later, the valley spread beneath her like a scar. Wind teased at her ghillie suit. The sun baked stone and bone alike. She watched. Waited. Calculated. Something felt off. Patterns didn't align, foot traffic too sparse, too clean. "Miller," she murmured, "this feels staged." He adjusted his optic. "Explain." "They want us here," she said, "but not yet." Below, a figure appeared, limping slightly, older, carrying a bundle. "Bait." Her chest tightened. "Maddox," she said into comms. "Recommend hold, possible counter-surveillance." A pause. Negative, Maddox replied. Intel confirms target identity. She hesitated. Just a fraction. Then she swallowed it. Copy. The figure moved closer. Too exposed. Too easy. Her finger hovered near the trigger. And then, movement peripheral fast. Heat blooms erupted on her thermal, rooftops, alleyways, tree lines. Ambush. Contact, she snapped. Multiple elements, they're collapsing on Bravo. Gunfire exploded below. Her world snapped into motion. She fired not to kill but to disrupt, precision shots into cover, suppression where it mattered. The radio filled with chaos. Maddox's voice cut through. Ghost One, we're pinned. She was already adjusting. But this time, the variables stacked wrong. Wind shifted violently through the valley. Dust obscured sightlines. Targets moved unpredictably. No clean shot. No perfect solution. She felt it, the old fear creeping in. Should have had a better shot. Marcus's voice echoed, uninvited. Her jaw clenched. She adapted. Calling targets, redirecting movement, buying seconds instead of kills. Miller fed updates fast. Then a scream. Rodriguez. Pinned behind a low wall, bleeding. Too close for her rifle. Too far for anyone else. Alina's breath hitched. This was the nightmare math never solved. Maddox, she said, forcing calm, I can't clear him. Silence. Then Maddox, what do you need? The question shocked her. I need them to move, she replied. Smoke east, draw fire. A beat. Then do it. She watched the maneuver unfold. Smoke blossomed, fire shifted. A window opened. Not perfect. Enough. She took the shot. The target dropped. Rodriguez rolled free. The ambush broke. Minutes later, the valley emptied like it had exhaled its last lie. Back at base, no one spoke at first. Then Maddox approached her slowly. You were right, he said, about the setup. She nodded, no satisfaction, only fatigue. You saved Bravo, he added. She shook her head. We all did. He studied her, then said quietly, You hesitated today. Yes, sir. And you still chose. Yes, sir. A pause. That's growth, he said. She didn't know how to respond to that. That night, alone in her bunk, Alina stared at the ceiling. She had always trusted the math. Today, she had trusted people. The equation was changing. And that scared her more than any impossible shot ever had. Because bullets were honest. People were variables. And variables could break you. Why did the waiting feel worse than the fighting ever had? Alina realized it sometime after midnight, lying fully dressed on her bunk, boots still on, rifle cleaned and reassembled beside her. The body learned how to survive chaos quickly. It never quite learned how to survive the quiet afterward. The base had settled into its usual half-sleep. Generators hummed. Someone coughed down the row. Somewhere metal clanged softly, a door not fully latched. Her mind refused rest. Not because of fear. Because of choice. She had hesitated in the valley, just enough to notice it, just enough to remember that hesitation was once the thing she despised most. And yet that pause had saved Rodriguez. It had required trust. Trust in Maddox to listen. Trust in Miller to execute. Trust in chaos to bend, not break. That kind of trust didn't feel like strength. It felt like exposure. She rolled onto her side, fingers brushing the cold edge of Marcus's dog tags beneath her shirt. The familiar weight grounded her. I didn't forget you, she whispered into the dark. The next morning came with consequences. Not dramatic ones, not punishment, something more dangerous. Expectation. At the briefing, eyes tracked her movements now. Subtle, constant. When she spoke, pens paused, screens froze, men waited. She had become a reference point. Maddox laid out the next operation, reconnaissance only. Borderline dull. No heroics, no Overwatch theatrics. Alina was assigned rear security. Deliberate. A test not of skill, but of restraint. She accepted it without comment. The patrol moved through rocky scrubland under a pale, washed-out sky. Heat shimmered off stone. Wind whispered through dry grass. Alina scanned habitually, cataloging micro-changes most people never noticed. A rock disturbed. A shadow too sharp. Silence where birds should have been. Nothing happened. That was the point. Back at base, Rodriguez found her cleaning her rifle again. "You know you don't have to do that twice a day," he said. "Yes, I do." He leaned against the wall, hesitated. "I wanted to say thanks for the valley." She nodded. "You're welcome." "That's it?" he asked. She looked up. "You're alive, that's the part that matters." He studied her for a moment, then smiled faintly. "You're not what I expected." She returned to the rifle. "Neither is war." Later that afternoon, Maddox called her into his office. No witnesses, no maps. Just 2 chairs. He gestured for her to sit. She didn't. He exhaled, then nodded. "Fair." He folded his arms. "You're changing how the team operates." "That wasn't my intention." "I know, that's what concerns me." She waited. "When you arrived," he continued, "I thought you were a risk, politically, culturally, tactically." She said nothing. "Now," he admitted, "you're something else." "What's that, sir?" "A mirror." The word surprised her. "You force people to confront their assumptions," he said, "about gender, about authority, about what competence looks like." She considered that. "I don't force anything," she replied. "I just do the job." He nodded slowly. "Exactly." He leaned forward. "But understand this, respect earned this way is fragile. The moment you fail, they won't say she tried. They'll say we knew it." She met his gaze without flinching. "I'm aware." "Good," he said quietly, "because the next mission won't forgive hesitation." The operation came 3 nights later. Urban, dense, claustrophobic. A compound stitched together with narrow alleys and stacked rooftops. Civilian presence confirmed. Rules of engagement tight. Alina took overwatch from a half-collapsed building overlooking the approach route. The city breathed differently than the mountains. Wind bounced unpredictably. Sound echoed and lied. She hated cities. Too many variables pretending to be constants. Below, the team advanced carefully. Then a child appeared. Too close, too sudden. Her heart stuttered. "Hold," she whispered into comms. "Civilian movement." The team froze. The child ran past, chasing something unseen, laughter echoing briefly before disappearing down an alley. Alina exhaled slowly. Seconds later, a shadow shifted where the child had been. Weapon raised. "Contact left," she snapped. Her shot cracked through the night. Clean, immediate. The shooter fell. The team surged forward, clearing the route. Later, Miller glanced at her. No hesitation that time. She didn't answer. Because she knew the truth. The hesitation hadn't disappeared. She had learned where to place it. The mission ended without casualties. Back at base, exhaustion hit her all at once. In the quiet of the armory, she sat on a crate, helmet in her hands, shoulders slumped. Maddox entered without announcing himself. "You did good," he said. She shrugged. "We all did." He watched her for a long moment. "You ever think about stopping?" he asked. The question felt oddly personal. "No," she said honestly. "Do you?" He smiled faintly. "Every day." Silence stretched. You know, he added, when I said you weren't a sniper, I wasn't trying to insult you. She looked up. I was afraid of what you represented. And now, she asked. Now I'm afraid of losing you. The admission hung heavy. She stood. I'm not fragile, sir. I know, he said. That's what scares me. That night, Elena walked the perimeter alone. Stars stretched overhead, cold and distant. She thought of the young woman she'd seen on the training range weeks earlier, struggling with wind calls. Thought of Marcus. Thought of herself, years ago, bleeding and helpless in a wadi. She had become something forged, not given. But forging left cracks. And cracks under pressure revealed truth. She rested her hand on the rifle sling. Not for comfort. For balance. The next mission would demand more than math. It would demand judgment. And judgment, she was learning, was the heaviest round anyone ever carried. Still she walked on. Because dignity didn't shout. It waited. And when it moved with purpose. Why did the smallest decision feel heavier than any trigger pull she ever made? The alert came just before dawn, the kind that sliced through sleep without mercy. Not loud, not frantic, just precise enough to mean it mattered. Elena was already awake. She had learned to sleep lightly, like the mountains did present but never fully surrendered. The briefing was short, clinical. A capture mission gone wrong the night before had left a ripple of consequences. A local intermediary cooperative for years now missing, taken alive according to fragmented ISR, moved fast, quietly. No signatures, no obvious trail. Which meant someone smart was involved. And smart enemies didn't make noise unless they wanted you to hear it. Elena listened as Maddox spoke, her eyes fixed on the satellite imagery. Buildings blurred into patterns, patterns into intent. They're moving him through a corridor we don't control, Maddox said. We intercept before the border or we lose him. What's the timeline? Someone asked. Hours, maybe less. Elena felt it then, the familiar tightening behind her ribs. This wasn't about distance. This was about judgment. The overwatch position offered limited visibility, multiple firing angles, civilian traffic unpredictable. One wrong call and the mission wouldn't just fail, it would fracture something fragile they'd been building for months. Trust. She spoke before she could second-guess it. Sir. Maddox turned. Go. We shouldn't take the shot unless there's no alternative, she said. If they scatter, we won't know who has him. A pause. This was new territory, not because she was speaking, but because she was advising restraint. Maddox studied her. Then what do you recommend? She traced a route on the map with her finger. Disrupt movement, force a pause, let them reveal themselves. That increases risk to the hostage, someone countered. Yes, she said evenly, but it reduces the risk of killing him. Silence followed. Maddox nodded once. We do it her way. Her way. The phrase landed heavier than any reprimand ever had. They inserted quietly, threading through terrain that offered more concealment than comfort. Elena took position early, settling into a hide that smelled of dust and rust. The city below was already awake, voices, engines, life moving forward, unaware of how close it was to breaking. She scanned patiently. Minutes stretched. Then movement. 3 vehicles, staggered civilian plates, 2 clean. They're here, she murmured. The convoy slowed at a choke point she'd predicted. Narrow street, market stalls half assembled, people nearby but not enough to block action. Stand by, Maddox whispered. Her heart rate remained steady, but inside something churned. This was the kind of moment math couldn't fully tame. The lead vehicle stopped. A door opened. A man stepped out. Hands bound, head uncovered. Alive. Her chest tightened. There, she said, he's alive. The second vehicle shifted position, wrong angle. Protective, not casual. They're nervous, Miller whispered. They know something's off. That's when the child appeared. Again. Different place, same effect. A boy darted between stalls, chasing a ball that bounced into the street. Elena felt time slow. Every equation she'd ever learned suddenly felt insufficient. Maddox, she said, voice taut, civilian in play. I see him, Maddox replied. Hold. The escorts grew agitated. One raised his weapon slightly, not aiming, just asserting control. The boy froze. A second too long. Elena's finger hovered near the trigger. This was the line. Shoot and save one life by risking another. Don't shoot and trust chaos not to choose for you. Her breath caught. Then she did something unexpected. She spoke. Rodriguez, she said calmly. Flashbang now left alley. What? He whispered. Trust me. A beat. Then pop. Light and sound ripped through the street, controlled but overwhelming. Shouts erupted. The convoy fractured in confusion. Elena moved instantly. Not firing at bodies. Firing at engines. Tires blew, radiators hissed, vehicles stalled. The hostage dropped to the ground, instinctively curling inward. The team surged. Shots rang out short, brutal, decisive. Within seconds, it was over. The boy stood frozen, unharmed. The hostage was alive, the enemy either down or fleeing. Elena exhaled slowly, muscles trembling now that the storm had passed. Secure, Maddox reported, all elements green. Later, as the sun climbed and the adrenaline drained, Maddox approached her near the med tent. You broke pattern, he said. Yes, sir. And it worked. Yes, sir. He looked at her thoughtfully. You didn't shoot when you could have. She nodded, because I didn't need to. That's not how snipers usually think. She met his eyes. That's how guardians do. The word lingered. Guardian. Not hunter, not executioner. Something else. That night the team gathered quietly. No celebration, just shared exhaustion and something like understanding. Rodriguez sat beside her. You scared the hell out of me today, he said. She smiled faintly. You trusted me anyway. He nodded. Yeah, guess I did. Miller raised his cup slightly in her direction. To judgment, he said. She didn't raise hers. She thought of Marcus again, not dying this time, but smiling, approving. Thought of the path she'd carved not with bullets alone, but with restraint. She had learned when to shoot. Now she was learning when not to. And that, she realized, was the harder lesson. Because silence could save lives too. And sometimes, dignity didn't announce itself with thunder. Sometimes it chose mercy. The final test was coming. She could feel it. And it wouldn't ask how far she could shoot. It would ask who she was willing to become. Why did the calm before the final mission feel like a goodbye she hadn't agreed to? Elena stood at the edge of the flight line as dawn bled slowly into the sky, painting the horizon in muted orange and gray. Helicopters waited in silence, rotors still, crews moving with deliberate care. No rush, no tension on the surface. That was how she knew it mattered. The mission brief had been different, shorter, fewer voices, no room for debate. High ground, limited extraction windows, one chance to stop a man who had learned how to survive every mistake others made. The commander's name wasn't spoken casually. It didn't need to be. Everyone in the room knew what he'd done. Villages erased quietly, hostages used as currency, violence measured, not emotional. A man who understood patience, which meant he understood snipers. Elena had listened without interruption, her gaze fixed on the terrain model. Ridges folded into valleys like clenched fists. Wind channels formed invisible traps. The overwatch position was perfect. Too perfect. This is a one-way hide if things shift, Miller muttered afterward, checking his data. Yes, she replied. You okay with that? She didn't answer immediately. I'm okay with the mission, she said at last. Maddox watched her closely. You don't have to take this, he said quietly. We can rotate another marksman. She met his eyes. They won't see what I see. That was not arrogance. It was acceptance. The climb took hours. Every step punished the lungs. Every breath burned. By the time she settled into position, sweat had frozen beneath her layers and the world below looked impossibly far away. She built the hide patiently, rock by rock, netting adjusted by millimeters, nothing rushed. When she lay prone, rifle aligned, scope zeroed, the stillness returned. The familiar narrowing. The silence that only came when purpose was clear. Below, the compound stirred slowly. Guards rotated. A single figure appeared on a balcony, the man they'd come for. No rush. No theatrics. Alina tracked him for nearly 40 minutes, letting patterns emerge, letting impatience burn itself out. This was what experience looked like, not action, but restraint. Maddox, she said finally, target confirmed. Copy. Wind shifted, not much, just enough. She adjusted. Then something changed. A second heat signature appeared where there shouldn't have been one, low, close to the target. A hostage. Her jaw tightened. Negative clean shot, she reported. Hostage proximity. Silence followed. Then Maddox's voice, careful now. Options. Alina studied the scene, the angle, the distance. The man moved closer to the hostage deliberately, like he knew. He was baiting her. She felt a familiar weight press into her chest. This wasn't about making the shot. This was about refusing to be controlled by it. I can take him, she said slowly, but the hostage won't survive the fall. Another pause. Maddox exhaled, then we wait. Minutes stretched. The sun climbed higher. Heat shimmer distorted sightlines. The man paced, occasionally glancing toward the ridgeline, not at her, but at the idea of her. He was patient. So was she. Finally, the hostage was moved, briefly, carelessly. A mistake. Alina didn't rush. She waited until the man's confidence leaned just slightly into arrogance. Then she fired. One shot. Clean. The body collapsed backward, never knowing where death came from. The hostage fell but alive. The compound erupted in confusion. Alina, Maddox said urgently. Exfil window closing, you need to move. She scanned once more. No secondary threats, no surprises. Copy, she replied. But as she rose, the mountain answered. A crack, sharp, close. She felt the impact before she heard it. Pain bloomed along her side, hot and disorienting, not lethal but bad. She dropped instinctively, dragging herself behind cover. Miller, she said through clenched teeth, I'm hit. Static, then panic restrained by discipline. Location. She gave it. Can you move? She tested her leg, it screamed. Not fast. The extraction bird couldn't wait. Enemy elements were already converging. Maddox's voice cut through, hard. We're coming back. No, she said. That's in order. No, sir. Silence. She steadied her breathing. If you divert, you lose the hostage and half the team. I can hold. Alina. You trusted my judgment before, she said quietly. Trust it now. The radio stayed silent for a long second. Then Maddox spoke, voice thick but steady. Hold for 20. She smiled faintly, unseen. She set the rifle again, pain screaming, focus narrowing through it. She didn't think about medals, or legacy, or being remembered. She thought about wind, about breath, about doing the job one last time properly. The enemy crested the ridge cautiously. She fired. Once, twice. Enough. The helicopter thundered back into the sky as smoke marked her position. Miller reached her first, hands firm, voice calm. "Easy, Ghost One, we've got you." As they lifted her, the world blurred, sound stretched, light softened. She felt the dog tags against her chest, warm now. Not heavy, just present. Weeks later, she stood on the range again. No rifle in her hands this time. Just a whistle. New candidates lay prone in the dust, struggling with wind calls and doubt. One of them, a young woman, missed wide and cursed under her breath. Elena walked over, crouched beside her. "What do you feel?" she asked. "The wind," the woman said, "but I don't trust it." Elena nodded. "Good," she said, "now trust yourself." The shot rang. Steel sang. Elena stepped back, quiet as ever. She had never been the loudest voice, never the most visible. But she had changed something fundamental, not by demanding belief, but by earning it. She had let performance speak. And in doing so, she had rewritten what strength looked like. Not dominance, not ego, but clarity. Later, as the sun dipped low and shadows stretched across the range, Elena watched the trainees disperse. The wind moved softly through the grass, no longer hostile, just honest. She rested a hand over her chest. Marcus was still there. So was the promise. And now so was peace. Because sometimes dignity doesn't shout. It doesn't argue. It doesn't ask for permission. Sometimes dignity simply acts and lets the truth speak for itself.